What? Why are you smiling? That's inappropriate.
Wow, that is highly inappropriate.
Because now, sir, this may be really, really inappropriate.
Take that down. It's inappropriate.
All these questions are completely inappropriate.
Oh, it's inappropriate?
Yeah, a little bit.
And it would have been inappropriate.
Do you have any idea how inappropriate this is?
But the hostility was completely inappropriate.
But it was completely inappropriate.
Your behavior is completely inappropriate.
It's not. It's inappropriate contact.
It's inappropriate. It's crossing a boundary.
They can be a little inappropriate. And loud.
And I'm just thinking how inappropriate this is.
Mrs. Albertson, I have warned you, this is inappropriate.
Wow, I'm gonna call a lot of things, man, but inappropriate?
And it's baseless and inappropriate.
Okay, kitty cat. This feels borderline inappropriate.
Isn't that kind of inappropriate?
It's you who have acted inappropriately.
This is entirely inappropriate.
It was inappropriate.
That's wildly inappropriate.
That was inappropriate and insubordinate. It's inappropriate for everyone concerned. Dude, completely inappropriate.
You are so inappropriate, it's crazy.
Inappropriate.
Inappropriate.
Oh, hello. This is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. And this is Inappropriate Characters. I hope everyone can hear me out there. And if so, please say so in the chat. Tonight we've got a big episode planned for you, which includes a big guest star that, frankly, I was surprised when I realized that we hadn't actually gotten him in before, because you would think it would have been pretty easy for me to do that, and yet this is actually his first appearance, and I think his first appearance on like any YouTube live stream show. So tonight we have with us Chris Miller from Mad Scribe Games, who is the publisher of a number of RPG products, but maybe the OSR people know him best as the publisher of my whole Sword and Caravan series. That is to say, the 4 books so far that have come out with related to Sword and Caravan, and about to become the publisher of Baptism of Fire, my next major RPG. I am joined, of course, as always, by Venger and Ryan.
Surprise, motherfucker!
Yo.
And well, let's get started. So thank you for joining us, Chris. You've often been on the chat in these shows, either in my live streams or in the chat here in Inappropriate Characters, and I've seen you often on Double D chat and other places, but you'd never been invited to the ball until now.
Yeah, I know. I've been around forever and ever, and no one's ever wanted to interview me. The forbidden fruit
now you know you've made it.
So thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah.
You bet.
So you are my publisher, which means that I might be biased in some of my perspectives, but I think that your work as a publisher, I mean, I don't think it's biased for me to say, because I get kind of my pick and choice of who publishes my books, right? And I've done 4 books with you, and that's because the quality of your work as a publisher, your layouts, your art, your fonts, everything, your editing, are all very, very high, in my opinion.
Thank you very much.
And what's your story as an RPG publisher? And did you have work before in some other context where you used these skills, or did you learn how to do this specifically for publishing RPG books? I know you published books before I started with you. That's what.
Right. So no, I actually I'm probably just as much a Luddite as yourself. And I really never had a background in graphic design or anything like that. It really came down to necessity. When I came out with, when I first came up with the idea of even creating an RPG myself, I didn't really have the wherewithal to do that, So I had a bunch of ideas in my head, for a rule system and a setting and everything. And I actually wrote the first draft of On Curve, on paper, sitting at Barnes and Noble, But when it came to actually publishing, I had to find somebody with some graphic design skills to do that. And I had to pay them an exorbitant amount of money. And so when it came time to produce another book, I decided that that was not the route that I wanted to go. I ended up kind of fumbling through, Adobe InDesign and that sort of a thing. And I did get help on that. I did some of it myself, but the majority of it was done by yet another, designer at the time. But I learned enough that by the time I had met you and you discussed that, you were looking for a publisher. I said, well, let me take a stab at this, and to my credit, I guess I've done a decent job, but I just, I'm very detail oriented, and I think that's where the majority of that comes from. And I want to do a good job, and I don't want to create a bad product. And so, I'll do whatever it takes to make it look good. But I mean, I hate to say, but everything I've learned for design purposes, Adobe InDesign and all that, it's only been about 2 or 3 years. So
InDesign in 2 years is an impressive accomplishment, Chris. I still pull my hair out with it. So
yeah, and I don't pretend to know everything about it either. There's still we had an issue actually with this current book that there were a couple of issues that ended up fixing, but sometimes the tutorials just don't cut it, so you gotta do what you can. But I really appreciate everybody saying that what they've seen of the book so far looks really good, and it makes me happy. So
the cover is getting a lot of attention, which is nice.
Yeah. So that's an interesting topic in and of itself. Pundit gave me a lot of information as to how he wanted the cover to look, and I paid a human artist
to make it gay and lame, right?
You're right. Yeah.
Make it gay.
I initially paid an artist who I'd worked with before $600 to create the cover for this book. He then created a cover which Pundit proceeded to denounce immediately. So I took it back for revisions, and he still wasn't all that happy with it. And I said, well, I do understand some of the elements. It looked a little cartoonish and that, And so I said, well, let me get on Midjourney and take a stab at it,
I told everybody there was not really a bet or a poll or anything, but a lot of people were speculating what AI helped influence the cover, and I immediately was I think Midjourney because I think it's one of the better ones, and it's
it took
I have a subscription to it myself, so I use it all the time. So I kind of know what Midjourney looks like versus what Night Cafe and Diffusion something.
Yeah, it took me about one evening, a solid evening to come up with enough images that I could pick through and say, okay, well, that looks the best, but it had a whole lot of problems with it, so I had to take it into Photoshop after that, and I spent another whole day on Photoshop, making it presentable. Because unless it's a chalk book, we don't want 8 octopus fingers per hand and that kind of a thing. So
that's right. I'm fortunate to have a campaign setting where like too many or too few fingers could be completely in line with the mythos.
Right. And see, you can just generate anything you want on Midjourney. It fits the setting, But with Pundit's books, obviously we have a very kind of a strict theme where he wants it to look very historical and authentic and very mature, and not something that's and I hate a lot of books that come out now that use this like anime style and the oversized weapons and all that kind of thing. I hate that myself. So
it can be fine for the right sort of game, right? Like if you're doing an anime style game, then maybe,
if you
right?
just
But you're not going to do that
RPG, just like look at the main page of Drive-Thru RPG. It's just like countless lame, cheap, half-assed, possibly computer generated like anime style. I would call it non-arts. It's garbage, most of it. And so what that tells me about the products on Drive-Thru RPG, just randomly scrolling, is most of them are probably garbage.
It was pretty incredible to me that this cover, though, everywhere it got posted had like massive results. I don't know if you know this, Chris, but I posted it in the community posts of my YouTube channel, and it got an insane amount of comments, and everybody was super positive about it, right?
Wow.
It's got the most.
But that one guy.
It actually got.
They criticized the cover for not having enough tentacles, but other than that, everybody liked it.
Yeah, but that one guy's an asshole. So
that's true.
Really.
Yeah, it's actually one of the best tweets that I've got going right now. It's been shared, like 30 or 40 times or something. It's crazy. So
that's 2 questions for you related to this. First, are you now happy that you took all that hassle that you had to go through to make that cover as opposed to the previous one? Right?
I mean, as a business person, I'm not happy I had to eat $600. But
I want to see that. If you paid for
that
it,
was going to be question number 2. Are you ever going to spend $600 on a piece of art for RPGs again?
I mean,
this is the argument of AI, right? Like, and
Ryan and I were talking about.
We're just to be fair, we're the artist that we're talking about. He wasn't bad, right? He wasn't a bad artist. It was just that it wasn't. It doesn't. You can't fit it as precisely to the vision that you have as one would hope, right? And it was. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't unbelievably good, right? Like that. That's a fair way to put it, and that's exactly what this does for small print publishers. Is that if you learn how to do it right, because of course, as Benjer just mentioned about DTRPG, right? There are 1,000 books or more on DTRPG that have AI art where it's absolute garbage because they're not actually putting in the time for it. Right?
Well, actually, I looked at Nick Beardia's video about Fatal 2, right? And they went through and did a review of the entire book. I actually downloaded it myself for free and looked at it yesterday too. They use AI art all through the entire book, and but what I gotta say is I was very unimpressed with the layout, and the artwork was all AI, but they hadn't touched up anything. So all of the images still had multiple extra fingers, and Midjourney.
Wait, could that have
problem.
been like part of the joke, right? Because it is Fatal. Like Fatal is infamously the worst RPG in the world, right? So it might make sense. It might have been on purpose. I don't know.
I don't know,
because it's a joke product.
Midjourney. Midjourney also doesn't do a good job with weapons. You have to be very specific with your prompts, and things like a lot of times, even with weapons, I'll just generate the weapons separately and cut and paste them into the picture because Midjourney doesn't seem to know what a sword or a hammer is. They'll come up with.
It's like the guy's holding a sword. You got that right, Midjourney, but he's holding it in the middle of the blade. It's like, dude,
right. Or
learn how to hold a fucking sword, computer.
Or he's holding it like a gun.
He's holding, like a gun.
We had the what's called the Red Room. They did a whole series of RPG books in 1 year, right? Using AI art. The covers were all AI art, right? Then they did the second edition of those books the next year, and the covers were meant to be like the same cover as the original, except that done with AI art 1 year later. And you look at the quality, like you compare Wretched Space first edition, Wretched Space second edition, and you can see that in 1 year that the AI they use has grown up a lot in terms of its abilities. So it's going to keep getting.
I'll tell you, even in 6 months, when I first got on Midjourney and started playing around last year, they were using I was using version 3 or 4, and now we're on 6.
Right.
And it is literally half a year later, and you're several steps above. So it's improving every day, and I'll tell you, it really sold me when I would, I told several people this, and I was talking to Ryan about it before the show here. I was an artist in college. And, I studied art and then I studied history. Neither one of those panned out, but I get it. All these people out there trying to make a living at doing art, I'm sure it's difficult. But here's the thing. If I paid, an artist to create the quality of images that are in this book, it would take them a month or more to do a single image, and it would cost thousands of dollars per image. And by the time you get through a 400-page book, it's $1 million, and you're waiting 100 years to get the book done. So it's impractical. But I can get on Midjourney in a month. If I really buckle down and work at it, I can get these images out for practically nothing. And it's
the point, right? It's
a game changer.
Yeah, it makes it absolutely revolutionary for small print publishing. And the idea, it's not that I want people to lose their livelihoods or something like that, right? But the point is that there are jobs that once existed that now don't exist anymore, right? Like, or that exist in much diminished capacity, right? Like you used to have coachmen, right, for your horse and carriage. Now you don't, right? Because that technology replaced the person, because it was a job that did not require a certain degree of excellence, right? So you've got people that could charge up to now $600 for a single page piece of fantasy art that was at like the middle level of competence, right? That wasn't horrible. But it also wasn't something that was going to be prized forever. It wasn't Alec Ross or something like that, or never to say nothing of Rembrandt. Right?
But before Biden, that $600 piece of artwork was only $300.
The art didn't get better. The dollar got more worthless. That's it.
Because of Bidenflation, But the point is that now, like that's not necessary when you could actually do an RPG product that's full of paintings that look like they're Rembrandts, right? Or whatever, right? You can have a level of quality and an amount of quantity of images that improves the conditions of it so much that it just, to me, that kills any other argument, because people say, oh yeah, but well, aren't you worried about you losing your job, pundit? Because it's going to happen to writing too, right? And what I had to say was like, it affects the people who are at the middle range, people who are slogging out product that isn't particularly clever, right? That isn't particularly impressive, but that isn't bad, right? And those people are the ones that are going to lose the opportunity to make money off of that thing, right? If they still like RPGs, they still make them, but they're going to make a lot less money, right?
And the thing too is with your book, again, it's a very specific art style that we were looking for, and it's just not a style that people paint in anymore, right? So if you did want all of your images to be Rembrandt, well, Rembrandt only had,
or whatever.
He only made a couple of maybe 100 paintings or something in his life, and it's only a handful of those are going to fit the subject matter that your book is about. So, if I take all of the masters and I can get maybe 10 images, but I've got 300 images that I need for the book. So, being able to recreate artwork based on prompts, for those specific artists,
specific prompts. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah.
It allows you to keep a theme throughout the book where it's not, well, I've got every artist on a different page, so I don't know. My argument is, especially for small businesses, like we're not making $1 million with this, we're not Matt Mercer, for the small indie publishers, it's a tool, and, listen, if artists want to do covers or do, interior art for the book, and they want to come up with reasonable prices, and it's not $1,000 an image, sure, well, I'll be happy to work with somebody, but,
and also the customers. Like I've talked about this many times. If I ran a Kickstarter and I was making $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 on like a product, I could easily afford to pay a whole bunch of artists to do artwork, fancy color artwork throughout the book. But if I'm making $5,000 on a project, like either it's AI art or I do it my fucking self, in which case it comes out like Scrap Princess, but even more retarded, or no art at all, or AI.
Your games are probably ideal for the AI art setup, right? Because it doesn't matter how many extra hands or feet or whatever are in the image, right? It doesn't matter how weirdly surrealist the image is, because it's chalk.
See, I have my own issues because I keep trying to tell it in the prompts, like, make this guy Fuchsia sky only.
He's like, make it
rain
blood,
indigo glow or something. Yeah,
make it rain blood.
More tentacles, you son of a bitch.
I feel your pain. I was creating a monster for my next project, and it has 6 legs. And
good luck with that.
I worked so hard. Now I don't use Midjourney.
Poor AI must be so confused, right? When you think about this, right? Because it has had millions of people telling it, no, motherfucker, 4 legs. And suddenly Ryan David comes along like a degenerate and says, no, I want 6 legs.
So, Ryan, I'm going to tell you right now that the answer to your solution is just tell it to make 2 legs and you'll get 6 every time.
There you go.
Well, I did, because I'm not using Midjourney, right? I'm not using a commercial AI engine. I built one that's living in my closet, and it's designed for the style that I specifically wanted, because I wanted it to be consistent.
Ryan,
you guys heard it here first. Ryan David has invented Skynet. He's going to doom us all.
You can tell us, is it a sex robot?
No.
That
part wore out.
Maybe you guys could tell me. It seemed like earlier on in Midjourney, you were able to come really close to the physical likeness of like a celebrity or something like that. But unless you're doing someone that's super duper famous, like Biden or Trump or something like that, like it's hard to get it to look like someone, because I've tried to make characters look like Jerry Seinfeld
image, right?
Or look like There's someone from Blake 7, and I can come kind of close, like dark hair or bald or something, but I can't like get it to look just like the celebrity. And there's a million pictures out there on the internet of what the celebrity or this actor or whatever looks like.
Right.
I just don't understand. There must be something preventing Midjourney from like
capturing.
There is. Okay.
The last update, there was a disclaimer that came up that I barely read, but it had something to do with a privacy notice or whatever, that they're going to make it more difficult now to create images of somebody specific. You know, they don't want people targeting folks and using images that would get them in trouble.
But Midjourney is already so like restrictive with you can't have any gore and you can't have any porn, you can't have any like offensive or like disturbing imagery. So like what's like Taylor Swift like standing next to a cat? Like I can't do that now either.
People are legitimately concerned about like deep fakes in either pictures or videos or things like that. Like I don't know if you guys noticed that YouTube just recently added when you're uploading a video, you have to make a statement that your video does not contain artificially computer generated video of someone doing something that they never actually did, right? Like deep fakes, right? And that is, for example, one legitimate concern, obviously, with AI. You know, Theory of Games here in our chat said, "Have the SJWs called the image fascist and harmful yet?" The answer is no, as far as I know, but probably only because they don't know what that cover is, right? So if you look at the cover, I don't know if you can bring up the cover again, Ryan.
Yep.
Baptism of Fire is.
Just tell everybody it's a soldier from the Ukraine, and they'll have to like it.
Yeah, but that is definitely not a Ukraine. So there was no Ukraine back then. There was the Kiev Rus, but Baptism of Fire is my upcoming RPG. That is, it's a reboot of Lion and Dragon, let's say, in terms of rules and in the setting. It is set in the early Middle Ages, in the 10th and 11th centuries, and it is set in medieval, authentic, magical Poland. And at that time in Poland, and the reason it's called Baptism of Fire is because this is happening during what was called the Baptism of Poland, which was when the Piast family, which were they became the royal family of Poland, converted to Christianity and then proceeded to unify all of these disparate tribes and peoples into one country called Poland by Christianizing the crap out of them, right? Like just going and spreading Christianity to all of the parts of what are today Poland. And so that guy on the cover right there is almost certainly meant to be. You can see that the heraldry on the shield is the Piast heraldry. It's the white eagle of Poland.
I had to make the shield, by the way, so that was all me.
Yeah. Apparently, the AI doesn't know heraldry.
No.
And so that guy is almost certainly Boleslav the Brave, who was the first king of Poland, and that him will probably during one of his crusading battles against the pagan Pomeranians to the north. So this is literally an image of. I guess you could say white Christian colonialism against
he was unifying the heck out of somebody.
That's right. Yeah, that was all about the unity.
so people are asking in the chat, like, so this is the system, right? This is a role playing game.
Yes,
this is an update of Lion and Dragon.
What it has is it's Lion and Dragon with some updated. Some more material brought in. Some of the material is coming from like the Old School Companion 1, which added new rules, like the critical tables are from Old School Companion 1. New magic systems, because I removed a couple of the magic systems that only make sense in the later Middle Ages and added some more magic that is more from the early Middle Ages. And a number of other little changes. And the only big change, like it isn't a new edition of Lion and Dragon, but it's an expanded edition. But the one big revision is that I got rid of the cleric and replaced him with two separate classes, which is the holy man. That's like the saintly monk type of guy, or
like a cloistered cleric, if you will, something like that. But
Yeah, or a layman player, but a guy who he's not a combat focused guy, right? He's a preacher and who's probably going out to be martyred to convert the pagans, right? And then the other side is the holy warrior, which is a guy who is a Christian crusader that is absolutely devout in his belief. And so both of those guys now have like miraculous powers, but they're different miraculous powers. Obviously, one is much more combat focused, and the other one is much more about doing other types of miracles. And that's just what makes more sense in the medieval context than the cleric ever did. So
it is all OSR D20 based, right?
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same system as Lion and Dragon, basically, and everything in there is going to be compatible with Lion and Dragon, and you can just you can choose to keep the old version or the new version of the supplementary stuff or combine them, right? And then it's got a complete setting in it too, right? With everything you need to play in 11th century Poland.
Now, Venger, I'm going to pivot back to the AI and say,
because otherwise it sounds like I'm doing extra shilling, right?
Well, no,
but
I'm not trying to stamp all over you, pundit. I'm just saying,
no, it's fine.
The difference between Joe Schmo going to Midjourney and getting your octopied Taylor Swift and someone that studies it as a craft, just like art is a craft, right? This is a tool. We had the same argument when digital art first launched, right? Oh, digital artists aren't real artists. You remember that whole spiel way back in the early 2000s?
Mm-hmm.
We're just fighting that battle with AI. You can still, if you know how to use the tools effectively, generate what you want in a short amount of time. Now, this is one try, no iterations out of my model, okay?
Octopus Taylor Swift.
So you can have your octopus.
I'll start the bidding at 1,000 credits.
Yeah, I was looking at Bender's eyes when he saw that. There was they lit up, you know.
but the fact of the matter is, this model represents, at this point, when I first started, it was about 300 hours. It represents like 600 hours of coding, programming, and curating the base. Plus, my model is specific so that it's only hand-drawn and it looks like it's from one artist. So don't tell me that that's not a craft, that's not a skill. Right?
It is. It's absolutely skill. You guys remember when like digital art started? That all of the artists at that time were complaining that it was going to steal their jobs and that they were going to lose a bunch of money, and that digital artists aren't real artists, right? And nobody thinks that anymore. So in 5 or 10 years, no one's going to think that that using AI art is going to be like that. Now Chris, I saw your eyes light up a little bit too. I don't know if you were going to try to outbid Benjer on that art piece.
No.
I am not
in like 30 seconds.
No, but I would say, Brian, you would have had to have done an AI of like Eleanor of Aquitaine or something, and then I'd be like, yeah, that's a hell of a woman.
Lady Godiva or something, you know. I have something else though. I want to say to still the people out there that might be critics of the AI stuff, in particular, young artists and things. It's not your art that we're stealing, if for lack of a better term, right? With this book in particular, I used mostly 18th and early 19th century Russian or Polish artists who are all dead. All of their works are public domain, and I used their public domain art to put that into Midjourney and curate images that would then be in a similar style. So it's not like I'm stealing somebody's stuff from DeviantArt or something like that, right? These are images that are created based solely on the public works of these dead artists, and so it's as harmless as I could make it and still do decent artwork. And so I hope that appeases somebody in the crowd who may still, have.
That's important. An important point for two reasons, right? The first is that obviously, yes, in my particular games, Lion and Dragon, Dark Albion, and Sword and Caravan, and so on and so forth, um, the medieval authentic thing means that for a long time, my books didn't use AI art, but what they were using was mostly very old art, right? Art that was not was mostly in the public domain or could be otherwise easily obtained, and so it wasn't AI just because there was a wealth of medieval and later, but old art that you put in there and would look really topical to my particular topic, right? That wouldn't work for Venger, for example, right? But the other thing about this is that it shows in the case of this book, because the problem was that there wasn't enough of that kind of art that was specifically like Slavic themed, right? So it meant that we couldn't just do what we did before when I was doing stuff with Dom Publishing or stuff with Mad Scribe. But it shows how part of the important use of AI if you're a publisher is not to just throw out anything in there, right? You've got to curate exactly what groups of images you want to use as like the inspiration for a style, right? Because one of the things that's really bad with some books that people have used AI art in is if it doesn't look consistent at all because they haven't done that, they haven't focused it, right? So it is a tool, exactly like Ryan was saying. And there will be people who will be much better AI art designers and people who will be much worse AI art designers, right? It's not some kind of theft of other people's work. It's using the public viewed records of the art that people have put up, and it's not just making a copy of that. It's using that as a base, a knowledge base by which you can create new art. And that's what humans have done forever, right? Like there's no artist alive today that has made art that is not in some way inspired by other people's work to begin with,
No, I've always said when the AI art is theft argument comes up, if you are going to prevent me from taking imagery that artists put out there to be viewed into my AI model, then your ass better be in the museum kicking the art students out from looking at the masterpieces as well. Inspiration comes from everywhere. Now, if I use my model to exactly replicate a particular piece, you might have an argument.
Then it's plagiarism, just like it would be if you'd like traced over, I don't know, a Rob Liefeld comic, and Rob Liefeld saw that and said, "You just literally copied me," right?
But ironically, that's how you learn, though. Being an art student in college, I mean, that's one of the things we would do is they'd take us all to a museum, and we would look at the paintings and sometimes take pictures. And they said, "Okay, everybody's going to come back to the studio. We're all going to paint this Rembrandt." So anybody who's making comics right now learned how to draw comics by drawing other people's comics, when they were younger. And that's what you did. You traced everything and figured out how to do it. And, so there's really nothing different. It's just it's a different medium.
Venger, any other tentacled requests before I shut down my interface?
I don't want to get too excited for the rest of the show, so
let's not get Benjamin go on a rampage or something. In the live chat, the Ultra American said, "I keep saying the only artists that bitch about AI are the ones that are either insecure, don't make any money, or put out shit work." Well, I think more accurately, it's the ones that are making money doing art that they know isn't great, but that the cost of art and its scarcity was allowing them to make a living. And this is the thing, people are saying, well, there'll be no more human artists, and that's nonsense, right? First of all, people can always make art out of the love of the craft itself, right? That nobody's going to stop using that. But even in terms of making money, it's going to be like when mechanization led to the clothes we're wearing being machine made instead of handmade, right? Before that happened, you had an unbelievable number of people who made a living making kind of mediocre clothing, right? That was that was actually more expensive than machine-made clothing. Right? Machine-made clothing made clothing that was equal or somewhat better for less price, you know. And what happened then is that, yeah, all the people that were making that basic quality clothing lost their jobs, right? But top-end tailors didn't lose their jobs. You still, you know, now on the contrary, the cost of a bespoke suit or a handmade dress went through the roof, right? Because it's now a luxury item. So if you become really good at your craft, you're going to be in more demand, and you're gonna have the opportunity to make more money for that art because of the quality of what you're doing, and the fact that there's the luxury element of buying from somebody who made it all by hand, you know, a unique piece.
Now, Inventor said it at the very top of the show too, right? He went on Drive-Thru RPG on the front page, and there's, out of the roughly 200 things that gets blasted at you, 198 pieces of absolute garbage. This is going to just be a filter. This is going to be a filter.
Oh, I was going to say this about like writers, right? Like that they were saying, well, but pundit, you're going to lose your job too. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Look, you go on RPG now. There isn't AI writing on Drive-Thru RPG, right? But there are thousands and thousands of absolute crap, low quality products that people have put out just to see if they can scam a quick buck, right? And those tens of thousands of low quality RPG products have not affected my sales at all, because my sales are not low quality products, right? They're competing with each other. They're not competing with me, right? The stuff I make is particularly unique and has its particularly unique audience. They're not going to say, oh, now there's like some kind of badly written BX clone that somebody made with AI, so we're going to stop buying RPG Pundit stuff. That's not going to happen, you know?
That and
we should probably get to the topic at hand if we're gonna.
Yes, okay, we'll do that. And then after Venger goes home, we can talk a bit more. Ask Chris a few more questions. And if you're in the audience, you want to ask Chris questions later about his own products, the stuff he's done, you know, Mad Scribe Magazine and Anchor, or about my products, or about what it's like to work with me. You can feel free to do so. But first. Go ahead, Venger. You were the one that suggested the topic.
So. This is your baby. Go ahead.
Okay. There's a lot to not like about the story game design school movement, whatever you want to call it. Pundit talks a lot about like the beginning of that in the Forge, in like, I don't know, 2003, 2004, 2005, that time period. And I was actually on the Forge as a forum member, sometimes listening, sometimes contributing. And I was very skeptical. Sometimes I got kind of swept up because I understood the basic idea that they were getting at, which was instead of just going by whatever was written down on the page, or whatever the role-playing game designer or adventure designer had in mind, or whatever the procedures were based on whatever game it is for you to roll, and then you do this, and players do that, and then you respond. There was, another way to do it, which was you put narrative concerns, like the story, in the driver's seat, and you kind of let that be your guide. And then they made, a lot of different role-playing games based on that completely different perspective. And what I like and what I do now is I kind of try to take the best of both. And I think that tension between traditional gaming and story gaming, where you focus on like the plot and the story, the narrative flow, creates the best kind of gaming because it's neither one or the other, and the tension between the two creates a sort of friction and heat and and energy and power and all that good stuff, and it it makes for a better overall gaming experience. I mean, that's why
100%.
But you
100%.
still have a game, Venture, and that's the point. There's still a game. Cheap plug. About 3 weeks ago on Nerd Cognito, we had a news story about, there's something that I want to do to modify my table. Of course, it came out of Reddit, right? If I'm going to do something, I'm just going to ask the table, do I hit the orc or do I miss the orc? We all and this was literally from the thing, we all put our dice in the tray in the center of the table, and our goal is to not touch them if at all possible.
Yikes.
It's a very communist approach to tabletop games.
That's probably the most garbage.
When it came to damage, we didn't roll damage. We gave hugs and kisses and counted them. But that's something else.
Well, it's interesting. I don't understand. I know there's a lot going on right now in the hobby, where people are kind of arguing back and forth about story versus a more traditional role-playing experience, and then you got on the far end of that spectrum, ROSR and that sort of thing. But it's interesting for me because when I first learned about Dungeons and Dragons, I mean, I was probably 8 years old, right? And I remember in the school cafeteria, there were just a bunch of guys huddled in a circle at this one table, and they were essentially doing a round robin and telling a fantasy story similar to the Lord of the Rings or something that was the only thing I'd kind of heard at that time. And so I sat down and got into that, and essentially what it was is they were trying to play D&D, but didn't have the rules for D&D. And we're 8-year-old boys, so we probably couldn't understand the rules had we had a book anyway. So we made up characters. And we had names and basically some basic ideas, I have armor and a sword, and so when I fight something, I do really well against that, And obviously there was some bickering and arguing that goes on with that too. I got you, no, you didn't, that sort of thing. But it was a very narrative-driven story, and we had fun doing that, right? And later when I got the books, it was quite a different experience, but. We've always kept at my table a certain amount of story and role-playing element to it. I like to use a lot of props and stuff too. I was a war gamer for years too, so I have lots of terrain and miniatures and things like that, and I like to get into all that, and I'll play music in the background. So I like creating, these different elements that kind of bring it to life. You need to have more than one sense, kind of affected by what's going on. I like it when they can see something and hear something and maybe have different scents and music going on and that sort of a thing. But
that's not story gaming though. That's you're creating atmosphere, which some people like and some people don't. But it's story gaming is a very specific thing because it's not. For example, story gaming is not if you have a DM who has an idea of a novel in his head and he like leads the players by the nose along the thing. That's what's called story-based gaming, which was like emphasized in things like White Wolf, right?
Railroading,
As the technical term of it is when you have a system where the players can use meta mechanics to alter the reality of the setting, right? So like they spend a story point and it turns out that there was a sword behind the barrel in the alley all along, right? And that's right. So that
there's lots of background too, in your like just inspiration from 5th edition.
Telling this meta narrative.
But the inspiration reminds me is basically a story game mechanic because you can do something like say with your character. Maybe
they just take agency from
your background. Or something like that, and then you can use a point of that to affect something that happens in the game, whereas you use inspiration to gain advantage.
So where's the line? Like I'm thinking back to phase rip Marvel superheroes, right?
I can tell you what the line is. The line is that like, because there can be mechanics, because some people said, well, okay, so but if you're what you're saying, pundit, is that if you have critical failures and critical successes, then that's story gaming. And no, it isn't, because the line is, are you doing something that has to do with your character in the universe, right? Remember that an RPG is meant to be a virtual world, and you're playing a character. If you're the player, right, you're playing a character who can do things in the world, right? And so if the mechanic has something to do with what your character can or cannot do, right? So he's rolling an attack, he gets a critical 20, so that's a critical hit. That's still him doing something in the world. The line is when something happens outside of that character that you are, as the player, using some kind of mechanic that changes the world in a way that has nothing to do with what the character himself could or could not have done, right? Because then you're editing the world, and that destroys the sense of immersion that it's a real world. Instead, it becomes a Potemkin village. It becomes a facade for this tale that is being told, instead of being a world, right? And
but
tales
if you introduce realistic mechanical procedures for creating more story that isn't based on communism, then I think that that can be a win for both the traditional and the story. And then
I think they should just call it something different too. I don't, because the story gaming. I mean, all these games are narrative.
Originally it was called narrativism, which was from GNS theory by Ron Edwards.
But
and
have you ever
a more accurate description of it, because it's saying we're not playing in a living world, we're playing in a narrative, right? Which also story gaming is still kind of kept, because what they call the whole process, they call it the fiction, right? And that tells you what it is. It's a fiction. It's not a living world.
It's not the story. It's my story.
It's a bad DM.
More so, it's collectively the story that is being created at the moment by a group of players, right? Which I always think is the fundamental flaw in story gaming to me, is that it's just group storytelling with extra steps, right? And those extra steps don't make the group storytelling better, right? They will inevitably, in some way or another, if you're actually following a set of rules, they will limit your options of that group storytelling, right? Like if what you want to do is get together and tell a story together with your friends, tell a fucking story together with your friends, right? But
it reminds me of an old
play. You have to create a living world.
It reminds me of an old game called Master Book. I don't know if you guys ever played that.
Yes.
Back in the day, I still have it actually, but I lost all the cards. But it used to have these a deck of cards in there, right? And so essentially each player gets a certain amount of cards, and you could get an advantage in character generation that would give you more cards and whatever. And during play, you could turn in one of these cards to affect the story, and you could change. Okay, well, the game master says there's a dragon in front of you, and whatever, and you could play this card that says, well, the situation has changed and the dragon is chained up, or it's behind a wall, or you've got you saw it before it saw you, and now you get a surprise attack, or what have you. And so that kind of reminds me of what we're talking about now.
There it is.
Some of the cards in the Master Book system veered into that kind of element. The irony of all this, of Benjer's argument, which is basically, let me see if I've got your argument correct here, Benjer. You're suggesting that there are parts of story gaming, there are certain elements of the mechanics of story gaming that could be taken and put into an otherwise normal RPG that would enhance in some way the experience. Is that a fair assessment? Okay. So the irony of this is that the original GNS people that created this whole idea, right, Ron Edwards in particular, would be appalled by that suggestion, right? Because what he would say is that you can't do this halfway, right? Because what you're creating is a suboptimal experience from his point of view. He would argue you're creating a suboptimal experience where you're essentially subverting the revolution, right? You're trying to have your cake and eat it too.
Because they considered, at least Ron Edwards at one point, I think he's probably recanted, but he considered D&D, as it was traditionally played, to be brain damage, or cause brain damage.
Yes, that's right. And until he realized he would try, he wanted to make more money by becoming an OSR guy, and suddenly said, "Oh no, I loved D&D all along." Right? There's a long history of people who made terrible choices, going on what attempted redemption tours. Right? Some of them appearing on Nerdcognito, but anyway.
I got a starter set in the mail yesterday, Pundit. Anyway, yeah, I don't know.
Well, so what do you think about that, Pundit? Like, so you laid out
my point of view.
Do you agree that that's possible? Maybe you don't like it, but for some groups,
I mean, the question of what good are story game mechanics in a traditional RPG? The answer is not a damn thing, because the use of them thwarts the fundamental experience of RPG play. And the only reason some people fall for this is because they have not played enough not enough RPGs, but they haven't played RPGs in a campaign that lasts long enough to establish a true sense of a living world and
I would maintain that not only would it be ideal for you to have a living world, but also a living story. I think to have the maximum amount of...
isn't real, right? A story isn't real. The whole point is you're trying to make a real world, like a real a universe that exists, a conceptual universe. But
why can't you also create a real story?
I mean, it seems like it's just railroading done by the players instead of the GM, right?
It's railroading,
and railroading bad regardless.
Right. I don't see it as railroading, because sometimes when you're playing, either the game master or the players, or maybe both, get into a sort of flow where it ceases to become like a railroad, and it just becomes creating the story as you go. But instead of relying on story by accident, which is kind of the default of the traditional gamer,
it's not meant to be a story though.
You meant to reflect reality. That's
the difference.
See, this is where it's
without relying on.
One of the commenters earlier said that this was essentially semantics, and I agree with that. I think different people may have a different interpretation as to what story gaming means. Black Lodge Games does a lot of story gaming, right? But I wouldn't consider what they're talking about to be the same thing that we're talking about now. So, in my idea, or at least my experience with story gaming in the past was very narrative driven, and it was a cooperative kind of a thing. And I think that has some place. If you want your games to have certain elements of that, that's fine. But I'm not big on, certainly not like the X cards or anything that gives players more agency than the GM in determination of what's going to happen.
Right. And that's one of the caveats that I would remind people that are interested in maybe combining some story gaming elements with traditional RPGs.
Black Lodge games,
you don't want the players to ever be like higher or above. Like, the game master should have total veto power over whatever's coming.
You heard it here first. Venger is
even if I'm surprised, I'll probably still allow it. But I'd like to have the ability to say no, or to say like, well, yeah, but not quite like that. I think the game master still has to be at the top of his throne. But I like to, uplift the players and encourage them to, bring their own ideas, not just like, well, my character has a canteen, so this is what I can do now in the game. But also, a little bit more than that. They can bring, meta gaming stuff sometimes, or, story things. And I use that with like the Chult X cards. That's a great way to introduce story gaming elements slowly and gradually and carefully into traditional gaming without going
that's
full,
now a mechanic
full
of your table, Venger. That's not necessarily a story game, right?
It provides elements for, as Pundit said, taking things outside the game and allowing
he's right.
those things to be introduced into the game.
Look, let me tell you guys
Avengers X cards. Avengers X cards, ironically, they ironically do the same thing as the regular X cards. I mean, so they're both story game elements.
That's true. Yeah. Look, let me tell you something about Black Lodge Games, right? Apparently, right now, for some reason, they don't like me very much anymore. But at one time, they had interviewed me and everything, and they did end up doing a video. They discovered Lion and Dragon and said that it was like the best OSR game ever made, right? And when I was on their show, I was explaining to them, like in Sword and Caravan, right? My Sword and Caravan campaign, this is how you create a living world, right? I run the game almost entirely without having any determined plot, right? Like there's a chronology of events in the timeline of things that happened in the real history during the period involved, right? But other than that, in terms of day-to-day play, and I've just played last night, it was a great game. We've got a really good campaign going. There's a whole series of random tables in the game. You're going along the Silk Road, and you can, the DM, there's a whole procedure. The DM can roll for encounters while you're traveling. When you get to a city, you can roll for the events happening in the city. You can roll for encounters in the city. There are locations. If you run into a mercenary company, there's a table you can use to develop a random event that's going on with that mercenary company, or in the merchant house, or in the tea house, or in wherever you're showing up at the caravanserai. There are rumor tables and all of that sort of thing. And by making use of those, I, as the DM, never have any idea what's going to happen. But in the play, if we recorded that show, which we don't, but if we did, it could look to someone like it was, like if they didn't know I was using the tables, it would look like I had all this stuff prepared or something, right? Because if you have a well-made series of generators, then that creates the effect of the living world. And the difference between a story and a living world is that in a story, you're always trying to fall back on the structure of fiction. But a living world doesn't work that way. And like the real world doesn't work that way, right? Like you have these, the example I always use in Sword and Caravan is Richard the Lionhearted, right? One of the greatest warriors of Christendom. He was a complete badass. And then all of a sudden, while he was still at his peak performance, he gets shot with a crossbow bolt by a 14-year-old kid and dies, right? And dies of an infection. He doesn't even die on the battlefield or something, right? Right. And so like, there is that difference between the unpredictability of real life versus the predictability of stories. That means that
some
stories
people don't want that. Some people don't want
experience.
King Richard to like die, later from a crossbow wound in his arm. Some people want something.
People are weak.
A different kind of fiction.
I always used to
think
say that
the fiction should provide a baseline.
The whole story movement started because Ron Edwards was pissed off that his first level character got killed by a goblin, right? Like that's the essential issue that people that don't like how RPGs work end up developing this other system where they get to like edit the universe,
Mm-hmm.
But it's. I mean, it might have come from that, but there are definite like concerns that are valid and make sense. The fiction is there wouldn't be D&D without the fiction like behind it. The Appendix N, like everything that inspired Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, all that fantasy literature, and now like TV shows and movies and books, comic books and whatever. So for me, I like to incorporate some of that in and have that, be maybe like guardrails or like a floor or a ceiling or something like that, to use it as a guide for the living world, as you say. Because I feel like the living world and the living story or living narrative,
those are inspirational specifically to the worlds, right? Like the Greyhawk had, as we all know, a little bit of Jack Vance, a little bit of Fritz Lieber, a little bit of Tolkien, but those are all influences on the world you're creating, because the virtual world you're creating doesn't have to be like our world, right? It can be a completely different world, and you have the rules of that world, of like what that world works like.
But it will have some sort of influence. I mean, whatever is in that world.
I think people are sometimes getting story and setting confused too, because you can have all the things that you're listing, Venger, are background things that can still exist and should exist in a game like Pundit would run, where everything is generated randomly pretty much. But I mean, there's still, obviously, after printing his books, there's hundreds of pages worth of setting material that
you have to, in fact, to make a good living world, you have to have that. It's just good background material, right?
I think
that's what I'm saying. You have to have both.
I think where you get in trouble though is when you don't generate things randomly. And I'm not saying everybody has to do that. I played both ways, and for years in the early days, that's how it was run. We'd have 10 or 15 people at a table, and everything was randomly generated from tables. And the GM had no idea what was going to happen any more than we did. But I've also played where people injected, kind of steered the campaign more in the direction that they wanted to see, because they had an idea in their head, more of a novel or something. And sometimes that's okay, but a lot of times that railroading can kind of be boring for a player, because once you realize you've got no agency and what you're doing doesn't really matter, because the GM wants it to go in this direction.
Right. That's taking it way too far.
It takes the fun out of it.
I'm against that too. I don't want the game master or anyone running the game to have.
I mean, I just say put a lot of.
That's the other thing that actually caused. The other thing that actually caused story concerns was that
to be present along with procedural or living world concerns. I think the both is the ideal, whether you have like 70-30 or 40-60 or 50-50. Yeah. I mean, that's up to the game master. But I think, to some degree, if you want a great game and a maximum immersion experience, you need at least a little bit of both.
I could see a case for that. Add season to taste. I don't know. It's.
I mean, it's season to taste. Exactly. It's what you want. And I'm not going to say like there's any wrong way to play. I just advocate for.
Oh, there are
what I've experienced. And obviously other people are going to do it their way, and God bless them. But I'm going to watch the second half, actually the last third of Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which we started last night. So I don't really have anything to promote or show anyway. Just get a badge at VentureCon 3, and when it comes out next month, buy the Chult Experience, Designing Worlds Like a Fucking Boss, if you haven't already backed the Kickstarter. There you
What's
go.
VentureCon 3 looking like, Venture? Have you already got an idea how many people you're going to get? Is there a lot of
I've already got like 20. And the first 2 years was I kind of maxed out at 25. But I'm really, really hoping, and it might take some blood sacrifice, which I am willing to do, to get to 50. So the goal is 50. One way or another, I'm going to get 50 people.
Excellent.
So that's it. All right.
Well, you guys can also check out Venger's got an article in Mad Scribe magazine this next coming issue. So
there you go. Awesome.
What a segue that is, Chris. You're coming on Nerdcognito to help me out next, because tell us what's going on in the world of Mad Scribe.
So I'm not going to lie. Mad Scribe has the current issue number 5 it's supposed to have already been out, right? I'm way behind. That was primarily because of my my day job and Pundit's book. So it took up a lot of my time. for those of you who don't know, I am a regular person. I did have a day job until very recently. I was a manager of a gun store, so nothing more American than that, right?
Damn right, damn right.
But it was supposed to be a part-time job a long time ago. I got suckered into taking a management position, and then next thing I know, I'm working 100 hours a week or something. But because of that, I didn't have enough time to do my due diligence on Pundit's book. So I had a lot of other kind of irons in the fire too, and I decided, fingers crossed, I'm making some pretty good money on drive-through and that sort of thing. So I went ahead and quit my job to focus on this book. So no pressure, but everybody should buy Baptism of Fire.
Yeah, let's hope so.
But anyway, I just finished working on Mad Scribe issue number 5 tonight. Actually, I finished it right before the show, and if I do say so myself, I think it's my best copy of the magazine. Again, it was a learning process, and as I've progressed over the last 5 issues here, I've learned all the how to fix all the mistakes that I made. So it's going to be out hopefully. Give me 2 weeks. I've got to send it to drive-through and wait for all that mess. As you've all been told before, when you're on a certain side of the political spectrum, drive-through does a review of all your books, and they do so in a manner that takes a lot longer than it would a normal book. So everything that I send to them gets looked over,
manual review.
Manual review with sensitivity readers and whatever else. I don't know, but on more than one occasion, I've had something to one of the copies of the magazine. I think it was the 3rd issue. Took almost 2 months for them to review and verify. When prior to me working with Pundit, my books used to be in and out in 2 weeks. So I have no doubt that there's a little bit of bias going on, although I am legally obligated not to say anything bad about drive-through RPG.
To be fair to drive-through, they have never blocked or required any changes or anything like that to any product I've made, because of course none of my products are especially political. They're
They're
historical.
So. And as much as I love the Red Room, I know they've kind of poked the bear intentionally there with some of their products. But so right now, Baptism of Fire is done. It's already been sent to drive-through. We're waiting to hear back because it's the weekend and they don't work on the weekend. We'll see what happens here next week. Also, the magazine is going well. I'm actually starting to work tomorrow on the next issue of the magazine. I'm always looking for submissions. So if somebody has a one-shot adventure or an article on a certain gaming topic that you're just dying to write about, and maybe you don't have your own blog or anything, and you want to get it out there for the people, send it to me. If it's any good, I'll certainly put it in. And I'll slip you a few shekels too. So there you have it.
Shekels are good. Pundit, tell us more about Baptism of Fire.
All right, so Baptism of Fire is, as Chris just mentioned, it's in process right now. But we're hoping that in a few weeks it'll be ready to go and it'll be available. People have been asking about this. It'll be available on Amazon and on drive-through. And maybe in a couple of other places, I don't know.
Yes.
But
anywhere books are sold.
There we go. If you like the cover, you're probably going to love all the interior art and the layout and the content. I think it's a great book. I suspect that Chris might think it's probably the hardest book he ever had to do, because it's a very big book. It's 380 pages or something like that.
I think I forget the actual number, but it's just shy of 400.
Yeah. So it's a big book because it's the first time I've done a complete system and a complete setting together, right? So this is big, and it's fully compatible with all the Lion and Dragon series. Of course, it's the same system I've used, just with some alterations. And yeah, well, we'll be keeping you updated as to when it comes out and all of that. And then I'm guessing I'm probably gonna have to go do all of the YouTube shows that want me to talk about the game. Apart from that, right now I've still got the pundit files are coming out regularly, and the latest of the pundit files is the biggest one I've done so far. It's Pundit Files 9, which is the 1930s Invisible College campaign. So if you're familiar with my Invisible College RPG, it's a modern occult RPG where you play agents of a secret magical society that is engaged in a cult war with other more nefarious secret magical societies. And involved in that are also like the intelligence services of various countries, and there's basically a war going on in secret behind the scenes for the spiritual fate of humanity. So it's got a lot of the best elements of occult modern RP, and of course it's not historically authentic. It's modern authentic, I guess you could say, in that the magic system is all directly based on real concepts in Western occultism. But it was set in the modern day, right? Like it's set theoretically in the present year of whenever you're playing, right? But I had a lot of people that were saying, oh, this would be great to run this in such and such time period or something, like in the past, right? And so finally I decided to do a source book for it that is the Pundit Files number 9. It's 22 pages or 24 pages, I forget which. The biggest one I've done so far. And that source book allows you to have all the information you need to play in a very interesting period in the context of the history of the setting, which is the years in the 1930s and the years leading up to the Second World War, where there's a whole bunch of behind the scenes conflict between the Aryan supremacist order of duel in Germany, and the traditionalist and rationalist Gormagans in places like Spain and the Soviet Union and Italy, and the Invisible College trying to fight for a future where humanity isn't basically repressed or enslaved or brutalized. And it gives you everything you need to run in that period. It has a lengthy chronology of actual historical events from that period, and also occult events in that period, and other guidelines like travel times in the 1930s and things like that, and how to modify the game to fit that time period, because there are some differences in terms of what the characters would have in terms of skills or magical abilities or things like that. So if you already like the Invisible College, you should check that out. And if you haven't tried the Invisible College, you should check out the Invisible College and buy that source book if you're interested in running a campaign in the 1930s. And like all of the Pundit Files books, it is only available on the Red Room store, which have been really good with me and have been doing like such a good job of bringing those books out on time and everything else. They're not the publisher, right? The publisher is Mad Hermit, but they're the storefront, and they've done really good as a storefront, and I'm very happy about it. And in fact, in this particular version, in case you want to try running it with a different set of rules, you've got the Red Room is making a special offer that if you get the Pundit Files number 9, you get a half-off discount on their Wretched Interbellum, which is their source book for the Wretched RPG, for running adventures during the 1930s, right, during the interwar years. And so that's a great deal. You should totally check that out. And as always, in spite of its large size, the Pundit Files number 9 is still available for the low price of about $3.50. So check it out. I guess that's everything for me for the moment.
All right. Cleaning up. Once you guys have spent all of your money, tomorrow, instead of getting that, $6 cup of coffee, go to Drive-Thru RPG and check out My Village of Greenhaven. It is inexpensive. If you like digital, it's under $3. If you want to hold it in your hands, it is $6.99, and it is a completely system agnostic village that you can pop into any fantasy system. So does not matter what rule set you are using. It is what I like to call imagination fuel for the DM. It's got shops, NPCs, events, tons of random tables. So you're not going to story game because, like Pundit, you can just figure out what you're going to do from the tables in the back. You don't have to do that either. It is a scaffold, but I want you to take it and use it and make it your own. And I am overwhelmed and humbled by the response of it so far. We're creeping up on Electrum, believe it or not, on Drive-Thru RPG, which is something that I never thought would happen for this little thing. And the next book in the series is in the works. While Greenhaven is very much a setting and a town, the next book is going to be a system agnostic adventure module sort of feel. It's also very dark compared to Greenhaven, but again, you can skin these however you want. They are designed to be adapted by the DM. And again, it's cheap. Instead of your cup of coffee in the morning, $6 you can hold it, or excuse me, $7, less than $7 you can hold it in your hands. Village of Greenhaven, just go to Drive-Thru RPG, search Greenhaven, one word, GreenHaven, and it can be yours. And like I said, I think it will have a place in everyone's table. And if you don't have the $7, I know you got $3 because you only spent $3.50 for Pundit's files. So, all right, gentlemen.
I'd like to go over a few of the comments on the live chat here because we've been kind of ignoring them with our rabid debate. George Egerog asked, any Teutonic Knights? I assume he's asking about Baptism of Fire. And the answer to that is no, because the Teutonic Knights did not exist back then. The Teutonic Knights are 200 years later. Where you can find the Teutonic Knights is in Sword and Caravan, because in case you didn't know, the Teutonic Order was originally founded as a Crusader order during the Third Crusade, which was the time period of Sword and Caravan. And in Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road, I add more information about the Teutonic Knights and complete biographies of the early grandmasters of that order. So if you're interested in the Teutonic Knights, check out Sword and Caravan and Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road. There was actually an amusing incident. I don't know if this. I don't think it's a problem to mention this, Chris. But the very first attempt at a cover for Baptism of Fire, had on the front cover that was in the livery in the heraldry of a Teutonic Knight. And so I said, no, that's wrong on two levels, right? The first is that it's not historically correct, and the second is every single Polish person who sees that will get mad, right? Because the Teutonic Knights. I had no idea. Polish state. No, I know, but it was that's another one of the issues about using an artist, right? Is that if they don't research the subject, they.
Again, the concept for that cover. Look great to me. The Teutonic Knight. He had a great helm with the bull horns coming up. And I thought it looked amazing. And then Pundit pointed out that it's about 200 years off. So I was like, okay, well, not my area of expertise. I studied mostly Middle Eastern histories. So Poland,
Griffith Morgan says, I want authentic art by good artists. AI just doesn't suit me. You can use it if you want. Well, Griffith, I would dare say that the cover of Baptism of Fire is very good art, and in a way it was made by an artist, which is Mad Scribe, right? He did it. And and it is if you're saying that about AI art, why aren't you saying that about like digital art, right? Do you need someone that has to like use an easel and oil paints, and is that the only defined art,
Yeah, I don't, listen, until very recently, I would probably have agreed with most people that, I felt somehow ashamed or dirty for using AI art, but I got to tell you, especially in the context that we used it, for your book, like I said before, it's not bad art. It's really good, especially after me spending hundreds of hours modifying everything in Photoshop and whatnot. But in addition to that, none of it was robbed from anyone. This was all the stock art that I used, that I curated to derive the images for this, were all taken, from public domain, either medieval, paintings or paintings from the 1700s or 1800s, some early 1900s, whatever was still royalty free. And the artists that made this stuff couldn't make anything for my game because they're all dead. So, so even if I had the money to pay them, it would be impossible. And, most of the, look, I searched for months to get art for this book. And everybody that I contacted on DeviantArt or some other forum, these kids for like, look, if you're not 50 years old, you're a kid to me. So these kids, they're all making anime style stuff. They're making very cartoonish stuff. There were literally just a handful of people that might have been able to do the job, and they all wanted exorbitant amounts of money. And I'm talking, tens of thousands of dollars to do even a fraction of the art that I needed. So, it is what it is, and it's a tool. Listen, if you guys want to give me a couple of $1 million to hire somebody to do art and have them just do my art for 15 years so they could have enough for one book, I'll have at it, but until then, I'm paying for everything out of pocket. My expense to produce this book before I see a dime is in the thousands of dollars. So it's a lot for somebody to take on, and for somebody on the internet who may not be a publisher, may not have these concerns or these troubles. I can understand it's a simple thing just to be like, you're a scam artist or something because you're using AI art. But until you've had to do it yourself, I don't know that you have a horse in the race,
Yeah. Griffith Morgan also says AI has to do with how it alters your consciousness. We're getting into hippie shit here. The deepest is that they use AI to control you through what you see. AI art will be merely a tool in the aspect of it. Well, my rebuttal to that would be, look at Ryan. He's made his own AI system for generating art. I think that what the real issue here is that AI art actually democratizes art in a way that may be inconvenient to certain people who previously, like the reason that people are able to charge $600 for their art piece is because not everyone can do that, right? Not everyone can make even a mediocre quality of artwork, right? So what it does is that it means that there's a lot more people that will then be able to generate their artistic ideas through this tool. And yeah, okay, you could argue that the AI generator owned by Google will obviously have an agenda behind it, as we saw when with the Google AI, you asked it to draw a picture of a typical Roman, and they would always end up being like a black lesbian woman or something like that in a Roman toga. That is a flaw, right? But the fact is that the technology being out there, a lot of regular people will be able to make AI generators, and this will mean that if anything, the oligarchic forces will have less control over what people can create, not more.
I am making an NPC named Bonquisha Maximus for my next game. We got some supers that came in. Our buddy Jeff from $5 Canadian style. What, if any, are the differences in created and publishing an adventure module versus a source book versus a core rule book? Oh, that's deep.
Well,
right?
So one thing I would recommend staying away from are 400-page books. As we've learned,
42 pages.
Printing,
Anyway.
yes. Printing costs just over the last 3 years, since COVID, essentially. COVID's been the excuse for everything, right? But since then, printing costs have skyrocketed, and they've gone up. I mean, my On Cur book was 300 and some odd pages, and that one cost me, I think, right at $20 to produce. And this book currently, our cost for a premium hardcover at cost is like $60, which is ridiculous. Now that you're able to mitigate that, obviously, if you can keep your books, say, under 150 pages or something, it's significantly cheaper. Also, if you can do soft cover, I would recommend that rather than hardcover. Standard and premium, a few years ago, the ink and paper qualities used to be quite different, and they're not anymore. Standard and premium are almost exactly the same at this point.
They're very close, yeah.
And you're paying twice as much for premium as you are standard, and I just don't think it's worth it.
That's Chris. What are the options that people will be able to get for Baptism of Fire?
Any option you want. I've taken the liberty of making a standard softcover and hardcover, a premium softcover and hardcover, and a digital version. Now, if you buy it through Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Walmart or Target or anything like that, the only option that they allow me to sell without doing other things is a softcover. So just keep that in mind. If you don't want to use drive-through and you only would use Amazon, you can only get the softcover.
The hardcover, go with drive-through.
Yeah, right. And the hardcover, the standard hardcover is, it's affordable. It's going to be, around $45 or something, something like that. I'll have to reevaluate that, because last time I made the prices, that was before we made some revisions to the book and we added a chapter and this, so anything, the prices may change from what I and Pundit had even discussed a few weeks ago. So, but to answer your question better, if you're talking about publishing adventures, I think are kind of the way to go. They're cheap to make. You can bang a lot of them out because they're, 20, 30, 40 pages or something. So you could, Red Room is good at doing this, right? A lot of their books are smaller, not all of them, but some of them are smaller.
Pretty thick,
yeah. But you're gonna the more products you can have out there, even if they're at lower price points, the more money you're gonna actually make, because you're pulling from different sources rather than just throwing all your eggs into one basket. If you're producing a supplement for something, I think that's also pretty good. But again, it's going to be quite a bit thicker. It won't be as thick as a core book. I've produced a core book before. I mean, obviously with this one, but with my own game as well. On Cur was originally a core rule system because I didn't know if I was ever going to get a chance to make more than one book, and I didn't know if it was going to work. So I just threw everything in one book. I later revised that and had a second Kickstarter that was successful, and I split it into a Dungeon Master's Guide and a Game Master's Guide and a Player's Handbook. Some people like having everything in one book, and some people can feel cheated, or like you're trying to money grub them, or, if you're splitting things up into too many items like Dungeons and Dragons does. So I don't know. I would recommend probably just keeping everything in one book, but again, you got to watch that page count. Once you start to get up to 300 or 400 pages, that book, I mean, there's a reason, Greg Gillespie is selling his stuff for like $80. I mean, he's not price gouging people. He's probably paying $65 or $70 for that book, and he's got a lot of really great artwork in there too, and I know
There's
that was
advantages to splitting them too, right? You can separate player knowledge versus game master
you can,
knowledge.
yeah,
and it helps you keep your costs in check a little bit too.
That's why I did it, really, because I could produce. So again, when you have more products out there, you've got two different income streams, and the other thing is you're cutting down the page count of both, so it's cheaper to produce, right? Cheaper for the customer to buy, and then I noticed like with my game in particular, because it's not Dungeons and Dragons, it's its own system. You don't want to inundate players with all this extra knowledge stuff they've got to read through if they're not going to run the game. And so after a few years of play testing and going to conventions and having people talk to me about that, that was another reason why I split the book. But I think it could go either way. I know a lot of guys do just core rule books, and that's okay. But like I said, I would watch the page count, because it's getting to the point now where it's almost impossible, to produce something and make any money off of it, because you're throwing so much into the product, and it's a hard sell. You're competing with WotC and all these other independent designers too, and if your book's $80 and it's a game they've never heard of, you're not going to convince a whole lot of people to get into it. One of
the advantages of the OSR though is that
right.
Now, I would say that if all you're doing is just another version of Basic Expert or whatever, my view would be that maybe that's not worthwhile, except that there are lots of versions of Basic. Like, I mean, Dragon Slayer just came out; right. It's doing really well. Like, there's still, even those still do well if you do them in a well-produced format. Largely, actually, that's where publishing matters the most. Is if you're making a clone of D&D, it's got to have really good art or something really catchy, right? That's right. Those are the ones that succeed.
Well, that's why, to me personally, if you're just gonna, if you're gonna write stuff for the OSR, do setting supplements and adventures. I mean, that's your bread and butter. I mean, look, I mean, Encore is something of a heartbreaker for sure. I put like $30,000 into that book, and I haven't made that back. Well, I probably made it back over, I came out with that book in 2016. So, I mean, it's a bestseller, but, so I've probably made that money back slowly, but not all at once, not in a way that really mattered,
Yeah, you really do have to absorb it. We've got another super coming in from our friend, the Ultra American TTRPGer. Oh, pundit. Ultra American wants a pundit file where we fight Horse Girl.
I don't know what that is, and I don't think I want to know, so let's leave it at that.
That's a Neckbeardia product, man.
Oh, I see. There's another.
That's something James would be much better at doing that. Have her.
Probably. Yeah, the Ultra American also made a comment a while back when we were doing the discussion with Benjer about Storygames. The Ultra American says, "Pundit, we don't have to play year-long campaigns, though. There's nothing wrong with playing one game for a few months and then moving on to something else." Well, yeah, that's absolutely true. That you can certainly play short games. Now, my games in my campaigns, a short campaign is one that lasts 6 months, but. And I have the World of the Last Sun that's been going on for 11 years and shows no sign of stopping. But I also do sometimes run short games, and Griffith Morgan was here up till a little while ago, And I ran a Tonnesburg campaign just recently that was about 12 sessions. There was, go through the dungeon, make your way down to all the way to level 10, and then we played that through, and it was a fun game, right?
But you got to remember, 12 sessions is still double the amounts of the average 5th edition game.
The average modern, current day length of a campaign, yeah. But the reason that I say you need to play a long campaign is that something happens after you get to a certain point. And my theory is that it's about 200 hours of play, however many sessions that may involve in the same setting, right? Maybe with or without the same characters, because characters can die, right? But where you're running that setting for that amount of time, where then the setting achieves a level of complexity where it becomes a living world in the sense that to the DM, things are happening now that are as a consequence of the weight of the previous events that that end up auto-generating themselves, right? And so like the DM isn't thinking, oh, well, what is my plot going to be for this session or something like that, right? Which is not the right way to handle it, but rather that stuff comes into his head and goes, oh, and this is happening over there, right? And then it suddenly does, right? And it's also where if you've played the same character for a certain length of time, which is somewhat under 200 hours, but it's you've got to have played him for a long time. And it's the difference between, if you make a character at level 6, that you're starting him at level 6 versus playing a character from level 1 to level 6, you immediately notice that difference even to a limited effect. But, where you're entering into what's called immersion, which is that suddenly you're thinking, instead of thinking, what is my character going to do? You have something just come into your consciousness saying, oh, this is what he does, right? Because the character has come alive in a certain way in a part of the substratum of your consciousness, and that experience changes your whole perspective on RPGs. So someone who's never played that long of a campaign doesn't know that, and therefore they're missing what I would consider the peak experience of RPG play.
Another super follow-up from Jeffrem. What are the biggest mistakes new writers make?
Well,
I can speak to stuff that I made. I had to really learn how to say when and quit chasing perfection.
Right.
That was the biggest thing that was hard for me, because if I didn't give that up, I'd still be releasing updates and updates and updates, and I would never be thinking about Umber Hollow, right?
This is something myself and a lot of other writers struggle with, and self-editing. Yeah, I write, obviously with Encore, I produced 2 books for that, and they're both 350, 360 or 70 pages. It's a lot of material, and I probably could have cut half of that out and still sold the books, and they would have been a lot cheaper too. I think Ryan though hit it right on the head. You've got to be able to self-edit and pare down some of the information. You got to be succinct. You have to learn how to write in such a way that you're not taking an entire paragraph to say something that you could describe in 2 sentences, right? So
or less.
Or less. Try. It's difficult because unless you pay somebody typically to look at it and edit your work for you, it's kind of hard to step out of yourself and look at it with fresh eyes like that. I used to get my wife to look at stuff, or I'd pass it off. I had a friend of mine that was an English major, and they would look at it and kind of tell me some things too. I do all the editing on Pundit's stuff too, and he and I have a very similar writing style. And Pundit, if I had a jab at him, it would be, he writes run-on sentences that are a paragraph with no breaks. But
he speaks run-on sentences that are a paragraph with no breaks.
Right.
That's from the style of academia, from if there's similarities between how I write or talk and Jordan Peterson, it's because we went to the same university.
But listen, if that's the biggest thing I have to worry about, I'll take it, right? It's just it's kind of hard to especially when you're first starting. Listen, I mean, I've been a game designer since 2016, but I still have the mindset that I'm new, right? And so I don't know that I have the answers for all that. I know that just with writing in particular, you have to get into a habit of doing it every day, even if it's just a little bit. You have to make yourself do it. Even if you don't write anything, you have an allotted period of time when that's where you write. And if you stare at a blank piece of paper for an hour and don't do anything, that's fine, because you'll get into the mindset of this is work mode. And when I sit down, eventually, after doing that over and over, after repetition, you'll train yourself to kind of focus more and get on task. Trust me, it's very easy to say, "Oh, I'm a game designer," and I'll sit home and play, Fortnite all day or something. So, I don't play Fortnite, by the way. It's a joke. But it's a live and learn thing. You don't know what you don't know. And so you have to kind of figure that out. But I would say the most important thing is to, like I said, make a schedule and try to learn how to self-edit. And that's basically it. And then just have an attention to detail. Don't let little things slide just because you're tired or lazy or whatever. You gotta do it.
Yeah. Well, the advice I would say is that there are a couple of major problems that new writers often get into, and I think probably the first one is that is the assumption that you're going to make your first book and then you're going to be living in a mansion with hookers and blow. You think you're going to become rich and famous on your first product, right? And that never happens, right?
Yeah, I'm still waiting for my hookers and blow. I don't know what happened.
If I have the house now, but the hookers and blow are not part of my lifestyle. But
yeah, I'll be happy to pay the bills.
At least not anymore. But the fact is, one thing that Chris said there about it doesn't matter if you think you're really clever or you have talent, right? If you don't have discipline, you're screwed, right? Like, discipline is more important than being enormously talented, right? Like, because there are some guys in the RPG field who have put out stuff that was enormously talented, but they didn't focus on the production, or maybe they put out like one really great book and then they don't do anything else, right? Because that they don't have the follow through for it, So that's the first big thing to watch out for. And then the other one is to not try to reinvent the wheel. That a lot of game designers, looking at his, when he says writer, I'm assuming he's talking about game designers, have this idea that what they do has to be radically different from what other people have done. And usually the things that have worked in the past, they're the best thing to base yourself on, because they have worked, right? And so trying to do
work.
crazy innovations just to say, look at how different my game is, well, chances are that's going to actually reduce the likelihood of your product doing well than if you're actually looking, I'm not saying you should just do a D&D clone necessarily, right? But I mean, the OSR is a good place to start because it has a built-in network externality, right? That there's tons of people that play it, and if your game is compatible with other people's games, that is an instant benefit for the likelihood that your game will sell more. But what you really don't want to be doing is rejecting what has already worked, and so that doesn't mean you have to do an exact you don't necessarily have to do a game based on D&D, but you have to say, well, D&D has been really successful for 50 years, so don't think that it's bad, right? Look at why it works. Look at why products that sell well work. If you're talking about adventures, right, or supplements or whatever, look at the things that have made the successful games successful. And so that's another thing, is that if you've only played like 2 RPGs and you haven't really read a lot of RPGs aside from that either, there's a chance that you're going to accidentally be doing stuff that either is subpar or that actually has already been done by somebody else in a better way, right? So you have to, it's a good idea to have a wide, if you're learning to be a mechanic, you have to learn all about how mechanics work, right? If you're going to be a game designer, you should look at how games work before you start to write.
Well, and that's a good point that I brought that up before because I've been on panels at conventions and stuff before, and I'm right up there with Monty Cook and all those guys. But one thing that we brought up that point multiple times to folks, right? The issue is, though, that I just lost my train of thought.
I'm going to throw a quick thank you out there. Judd Goswick threw us a $10 super just for the loads of great discussions. Thank you, Judd. We appreciate every buck. Bills are coming up. We don't want to have to do another pledge drive like we did last year, but I will. Go ahead.
Going back to what we were saying is essentially if you're going to create your own system, let's say it's something that's not Dungeons and Dragons, you don't want to deal with the OGL, or you've got this really great idea for something that you just want to be different. You need to play as many games as possible or read as many games as possible. You can't just have played D&D and then make something different because it's not going to be that different. And like you said, D&D's been around for 50 years, and there's a reason why it's popular, right? They've already nailed down that way of doing things. So if you're dead set on making something different, you got to play anything you can get your hands on, whether it's Star Wars or Star Trek or Call of Cthulhu, the Master Book game we talked about earlier in the show, Palladium. You got to get the D6 system or dice pools. Try different things and see how they structure their rules and their mechanics, and see what you like, and kind of cherry pick things. Mix some stuff together, see what you like, and see if it works. A lot of times it won't, or you'll think it'll work, and then after play testing you realize it was crap. But it took me years, to get the system for Encore to actually work. I knew even back in 2000 that I wanted to create a game. I just didn't have any idea how to do it. And I thought, well, I've played games my whole life. Surely I can write one. And it took me like 10 years to do it, and I think it's a really great system. But because it's not D&D, it doesn't sell well. So it doesn't matter that it's a great system either. So that's another thing, I don't necessarily recommend trying to create something other than a D&D product right now, because,
if you're doing something a labor of love, right, then fine, right? Like if it doesn't matter to you if it sells 10 copies or 10,000 copies, fine, right? But if part of the question is how to be a successful, in terms of materially successful author, then you've got to keep these things in mind, right? However much you might want to do otherwise.
And I hate saying that because, listen, I love my game. I think it's brilliant, and I pat myself on the back for making it. But the thing is, it's not monetarily successful. I mean, there are literally hundreds of people around the world who play it. But yeah, I don't know. If I had it to do over, I would probably have just created a weird ancient aliens setting for D&D, and made a hell of a lot more money.
You could do Anchor.
And I still could, I guess.
You still can. I think to pivot and just sort of play off of this, I could speak from some personal experience. Greenhaven is reasonably successful. It's the result of me pumping the brakes on exactly what you guys are talking about. I have a system that is probably 85% done, but I know that through playtesting and through other stuff, it's not the right time for it,
right?
Because there are differences. So I needed a different channel, so I was able to sort of redirect my efforts. And I think as a writer, that's important too, because you're going to hit roadblocks. You're going to hit research blocks. You have to be able to flip the switch and go to something else. Now, it worked out in my benefit because people like it. I'm still blown away that people freaking like this thing. They like it, so now that's the avenue that I'm going. It doesn't mean that the other project is dead. Far from it. It just means that other project has the ability to breathe and grow and possibly shrink, right? Because page count was like at 300. I wanted it at 150. I got work to do. This gives you the opportunity to do it without wasting time and resources because you're still focused. And this speaks to, Chris, your talk about being able to, self-regulate, and Pundit, your thing with being able to be dedicated. You have to put that into the right channel. And it was a bitter pill. I didn't want to put it aside, but I had to. And
it really hurts having to cut stuff out too, right? Like you were talking, you've got a 300-page book that you want to be 150 pages. You created all of that. So there's none of it that you don't like, because if you didn't like it, it wouldn't be in the book in the first place.
There's none of it that I don't like, but there is stuff that doesn't work, right?
So you're having to cut away stuff that you love, that you want in there. And sometimes, like you said, it's a bitter pill, to swallow. It's hard to do. There were things with Encore that didn't make it in the book that, I was like, man, well, I wanted that to be an integral part of the game. And, but playtesting, it just showed that it didn't really work, and it was extra pages and,
Yep. We are creeping up on the 2-hour mark, everybody. We're still 52 strong live with us on Pundit. I don't know if you knew this. We did it on the Super Bowl, and now we're doing it again. It is WrestleMania Sunday.
I had no idea.
So
I'm not a WrestleMania guy, surprisingly.
our schedule this year is a real banger when it comes to Sunday night events, but that's okay. We've got our strong and faithful for the Sunday Night Delight here in with us. Last call to get those things in. Pundit, Chris, anything you guys want to address?
Yeah, I've got a few more. There's some more comments on the chat I wanted to address. First of all, Surly Unicorn here is throwing shade on my boy Richard Lionheart. And he says, from getting unhorsed by William Marshall to a kid with a crossbow. Well, both of those are true, right? Early on in his career, he gets unhorsed by William Marshall during the time that Richard is fighting his dad. William Marshall was the greatest knight of his generation, and was, Richard's dad's right-hand man. And when Richard was hunting down his father to finally force him to recognize him as his heir, William Marshall got in the way, and the two of them fought, and Marshall knocked him off his horse. But that is literally, as far as we know, the only time anyone managed to unhorse Richard the Lionheart, and that guy William Marshall is well known as like the greatest knight of all time, right? And in between those two events, being unhorsed by William Marshall and dying from a crossbow bolt shot by a 14-year-old kid, Richard the Lionheart was the only guy who beat Saladin, right? Who was easily the greatest military figure of his time in the Muslim world. You know, he was
and also a great horseman too, right?
He was good in everything he did. You know, so you know, like obviously, people might think in terms of my personal politics, right? There could be some kind of agenda there, but in Sword and Caravan, I give a fair shake to both sides of the conflict, right? Like that it's even in the Middle Ages, people realized that you know, the Christian world realized that Saladin had some of the chivalric characteristics that they admired, you know, and that was like one of the most epic confrontations of two guys who happened to be alive at the same time that were both like massively impressive figures.
Surly followed up. He said he's not saying getting unhorsed by William Marshall is a mark of shame. He likes Richard the Lionheart.
I mean, nobody who fought William Marshall came out well, you know, and Richard did better than most. Let's see what else we've got here to talk about. Surly Unicorn says at least Richard didn't die choking on a ham sandwich. Let me see here. Trying to look through all the comments because I love to answer people's comments and questions, right? So if you've still got some coming up, put them out there.
They do. We got another.
It's an expensive book, but I still plan on getting Invisible College. Well, we're talking about large-sized books, and I think that there is an important place to have big books. One of the things I'll say is that if you want to have a chance of being a financially successful RPG designer, the secret is you have to write hundreds of products of different sizes and for all of them to be decent products, right? For whatever the context is, right? Like the pundit files are small books or small PDFs really that are not expensive, and the production isn't hugely. I mean, it's very good. Matt Hermit has done a really good job of the quality of the production for the relative cost of the product, right? But you know, the content is still good, right? And if you make a lot of good content, quality products of different varieties, that some people will buy one type of thing and some people will buy another. That is the secret. It's the cumulative effect of being of constantly producing, which is part of what I meant by saying discipline. You know.
We got another $5 Canadian money super chat from Jeff from Aberrations, Infernals, or Undead. Out of those three, which are your favorites for use as long-term foes in campaigns, and why?
I mean, you know, look, I've been a fan of Undead for as long as I can remember, but I got to tell you, I've used a lot of demons and things like that in my campaigns before. It certainly is. As like arch villains and that sort of a thing. Maybe they had an army of undead or something, but it was, you know, a lot of the big baddies are demons in my games.
And I agree, and I'm in line with that too. And I think the key phrase in the question is as long-term foes, right? I love undead. I love all sorts of horribleness in my monsters, but having one of the things that's core to why we play is the struggle between good and evil. And what could be more evil than a demon from the depths of the hells? So
and what's more long-term than undead? I mean,
yeah, but they're dumb, generally speaking.
Now, allow me to give the minority opinion here. In most of my campaigns, the long-term foes are humans. And
that's fair.
In my Sword and Caravan campaign, the player characters have faced like an ancient undead chief or king or something like that. They've faced giants and they fought like dogmen and things like that. But you know, I think that right now they would be in agreement that their greatest enemy thus far in the campaign has been Inak Khatun, who is this scheming aristocrat in the Seljuk Turk court, she was kind of like Livia from I Claudius, right? Like she poisoned two of her husbands, and then she like plotted for her sons to take the throne of the Seljuk court, and right now the player characters are on the side of the true Sultan of the Seljuks, who they helped to liberate from his imprisonment, and now he's trying to retake his throne. And Inak Khatun is like sending assassins against them and stuff like this, right? They're like, God damn it, we have to get her, like humans make the best enemies, I think. Now that said, in my Last Sun campaign, I've had some recurring villains that are obviously not humans. There aren't a lot of humans in the Last Sun campaign. But even there, some of the most memorable ones have been humans or near humans that, because it's like they've fought demon princes and obviously like the daemons from the setting, which are like these super powerful demigod type entities and other big bads, right? But the villains that actually tend to like stick around are usually like certain evil wizards they've pissed off, or everybody that Bill the Elf has fucked over. At one point there was an anti-Bill coalition of all of these varied characters from the last 10 years of the campaign that all decided to come together to try to take out Bill the Elf, and stuff like that. So often the best villain is the one that's like the product of the player character's actions too, whatever that might be. John Fraser here says, in regards to my pundit files, that damn Loch Ness monster is going to keep hitting up Chef's dad for $3.50 to buy the pundit files. Yeah. Let me see what else we've got, if anything else here. What is the release date for Baptism of Fire? Well, in a few weeks. That's all I can say, Judd.
Yeah. Hopefully 2 weeks.
When drive-through pushes the button.
I'm going to guess maybe 3 weeks, but yeah, it's going to be somewhere around there. Assuming that there's no big problem with the print proof, and like if it comes out right, then we're good. Let's see what else we've got here. Judd Goswick says regarding people who are reinventing the wheel, he says, true, it's funny to me how many games think they're the first to not have classes or levels. Yeah, that is a very common thing that happens with people who've only played D&D and then try to write an RPG. Ultra American says, I like the idea for Invisible College, but I'll probably use a different system for it. No offense. Well, no offense taken, right? Like all of my books, I try to have a bunch of material that if you don't want to play that particular game or that particular setting, you can take it and put it into other games and other settings, especially if it's other OSR games. But, in general, like, my setting books like Sword and Caravan or Dark Albion, they're largely system neutral. So you can use the setting with, like you could run Sword and Caravan with GURPS if you wanted to,
And not for nothing, and pundit, I love Sword and Caravan, but I use it like a buffet when I need that flavor in a certain area of a campaign.
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean,
yeah.
One of the funny things is a lot of Al-Qadim fans, like there's this Al-Qadim group on Facebook, and they really like Sword and Caravan for obvious reasons, right?
Yeah.
Like it's definitely
I still have all the Al-Qadim stuff. I really liked, all the Oriental adventures and all that stuff back then. I've traveled around the world. I was a missionary when I was younger, so I've been all over the place. And I used to live in India. And I'll tell you what, those books were a lot better than people give them credit for. And I know that they get it's mostly people, I think, that haven't played it or haven't read them that tend to say, oh, they're racist, or it's the Jackie Chan version of Asians. those movies you used to watch on the weekends or something. But I don't think so. I think a lot. I mean, it definitely is fantasy based, but a lot of it is taken from real history as well, and real culture.
Yeah,
and
I just
I
had
wrote
this argument, Chris, with someone. We're not reproducing Chinese culture. We're not reproducing Japanese culture. We're making a fantasy culture.
It's a game.
Has elements
I'm
of
not.
that.
I'm actually reproducing those cultures. Right?
Pundit is reproducing those cultures.
Well, but see, like when I wrote
kids, because we wanted to be ninjas, we wanted to be samurai, right?
And trust me, none of these diversity hires at WotC are going to do any better because they're Americans as well, right? They may have magic blood, but other than that, they were raised in the same school system. They speak the same language. They have the same, video games. They watch the same TV. They're not going to produce anything more than I or Pundit would produce if we put our minds to it. And when I wrote On Kerr, it's based on Sumerian mythology, and yes, I mixed in some Indo-European or Aryan stuff in there as well to kind of fill in the gaps. But there's a lot of that in there that is actually true to life, and true to history. Aside from the ancient aliens aspect of it, right? So, but I mean, one of the books that I wrote was about ancient Africa, and I researched ancient African, history and culture for 2 years, to write that book. And I would venture to say there's more Afrocentric stuff in that book that, that's positive in nature towards, Africans, than any other role-playing game I've seen. You've got all these BIPOC conventions and stuff. Where people make games and they come out with something that looks like blaxploitation or and I'm just like, what are you guys doing? I don't think you have to be from that culture to be able to research something correctly and make a game that does justice to that race or culture. I think that's to think otherwise is just to me it's quite frankly racist. But
it's definitely unfair to claim that there was some kind of racism involved in the creation of either Oriental Adventures or Al-Qadim.
Right.
You can say that the people who made them were at best amateur historians or amateur anthropologists, right? There are, I mean, especially Oriental Adventures does obviously include a lot of stuff that came out of Gary Gygax's relatively extensive knowledge of movies and TV and fiction about China or Japan. There's like stuff there that's clearly.
I'll venture to say though, it was
movies and Shogun and stuff like that, right?
It was probably the best thing written about Asian culture in gaming at the time, for sure. I mean, it was worlds above anything else.
Yeah. And I mean, it was until about the time that Eric Wujik did Ninjas and Super Spies in Mystic China, because he was very well versed in the subject of Chinese history and culture and things like that, right? Ironically, Baptism of Fire is the first time that I actually do have magic blood to write the setting, right? Because I'm Polish, right? But I didn't grow up in Poland. I've never been to Poland, actually. I'm descended from Polish people, but that has almost no effect. Incredibly, I found that my being Polish has almost no effect in my ability to write a good Polish book, right? The reason that it's going to be a good book about Polish history is because I'm a historian and I had to do a whole bunch of research about it, right? And so it's the same thing, right? Like, you're right, absolutely. I mean, and this was proven with like Daniel Kwan, who was the guy that convinced Wizards to claim that Oriental Adventures was racist. And then when he got the chance in Candlekeep to do an adventure, like he was saying, oh, it was racist because it was just based on Kung Fu stereotypes. His adventure was entirely based on Kung Fu stereotypes, right? It had nothing to do with any kind of deep knowledge of Chinese history or culture, right? Because he doesn't have that. So it's a nonsense argument. His argument comes down to being you have to be this race to do this product, and if you do this product, it doesn't matter how shitty it is. If you're the right race, then it's okay, right? Like, and that's completely wrong, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got a lot of shit when I first, like I said, so the second Onkur book was set in Africa, and you know, according to the even on the title of the book, it's Onkur, Land of the First People is the name of that book. And so I'm alluding to the fact that again, this is all based on Sumerian mythology, right? So the Sumerians say that their culture, well, that the people of planet Earth were created by the gods and placed in South Africa to mine gold. So I put it in the book. And, you know, I got a bunch of shit when I first wrote that book and tried to go on the kind of the circuit and do videos and things. You know, that I was a white guy and I wrote something, you know, about Africans, and especially that the book contains slavery. You know, but that's their own history too. You know, like if you ask, you know, tribal leaders where their people came from and what their origin story was, it's very similar in all parts of Africa, and it's very similar, actually, you know, and surprisingly, to the Sumerian stuff. And so you find all these connections, and it wasn't something I made up. You know, I'm learning it from the horse's mouth. You know, so you know, but I don't think that. You know, again, it's like if you want people of color to produce these games, then people of color have to produce games. You know, the reason I made this book is because nobody else had.
You know, the most successful RPG ever made by a person of color, so to say, is Cyberpunk by Mike Pondsmith, right? And it has nothing to do with African content, because that's the other side, is that it almost seems to be arguing that if you are, say, a black game designer, oh, you have to write black games, which is just stupid, right? That's pointless. And
Cyberpunk's amazing, and I love that game. I used to play it all the time. And you know, do I?
You know, which is a Japanese anime game. You know, like
do I then get mad at Mike Pondsmith for appropriating my culture? And no, I don't care what color he is or whatever. I'm just like, oh man, it's an awesome game. You know, thanks.
Culture too, right? He's American. You know, like that's,
you know,
that's the thing. And when you're talking about like historical material, right? Like again, the average Polish person would not be able to write Baptism of Fire, right? Just because, like, I guess Americans have a relatively short history, right? But if you're like talking about English history, for example, the average Englishman couldn't have written Dark Albion, right? Because it has a whole bunch of historical knowledge that is not what the typical Englishman isn't going to know all of the details of what happened in the War of the Roses, you know? So it's really got nothing to do with a person's background in terms of their racial identity. It has to do with have you got or do you study the source material or not, you know? And like, you know, I would trust a black guy who got a PhD in Slavic history to write a Slavic RPG,
right?
That is going to be a lot better than an average Polish gamer, you know. That said, I know a lot of Polish gamers that have been on my comments and YouTube and stuff saying they're looking forward to seeing the book, and I hope that it doesn't fall short for them. But I suspect that a lot of them are going to be like, oh, yeah, I didn't know about this. Because you're talking about 1,000 years ago, right? Like there's going to be stuff there that comes out of the lore that isn't part of the modern day folklore of Poland. You know, it's part of the ancient, you know, the almost pre-Christian period.
And now I'm
most
even
people don't know anything about, you know.
And now I'm very glad I didn't put the Teutonic Knight in there. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been an instant, because every Pole does know that.
Oh, I can't wait to get that book. Let me just.
There are a few things. Polish people do have a bit more knowledge of their own history than a lot of other cultures, just because of the history of the many troubles that they've had over the last few centuries. So
Mm-hmm.
they tend to hold grudges, right? So anything that if you do a Polish RPG book and you make the Germans or the Russians look good, that's not going to work. The Poles will not be happy with that. But yeah. Oda Manjiro says, Daniel Klum bitching about inaccuracy while failing to recognize some of the Japanese folklore. What a clown. Yeah. Mike Pondsmith, Judd Gossick says, Mike Pondsmith also gave us Teenagers from Outer Space. Yeah, well, he was an amazing game designer in the 1980s and 90s, you know.
I played that game once, actually. It was a fun session.
We just got a super chat from David Nixon for $5, and he says,
Sure
Pundit,
did.
do you enjoy those books by Eric Wujcik? I've used stuff from them many times in my Palladium fantasy as well. I loved everything Eric Wujcik ever made. As I've mentioned many times before, I had a close relationship in correspondence and phone calls with him and stuff, and he was basically kind of my mentor in terms of like how to be a good DM, and then later he was a big inspiration for me being a game designer, you know. So and I think everything Eric Wujcik ever made was really amazing products. It's part of what made Palladium so successful was that Mike Siembiera had, and I'm sure he would say the same thing, that Mike Siembiera had Eric Wujcik writing for him was a huge benefit to him. He made Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and I think he did Beyond the Supernatural. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
He made Mystic China. He made Ninjas and Super Spies. He wrote the Amber RPG, which is one of the few cases of someone doing something truly innovative that really worked. Yeah, he was definitely legit in terms of his knowledge of Chinese history and mystics, because he was into all that stuff. And of course, you guys know I am, so we had a lot to talk about in those areas. So yeah, Eric Wujcik was one of the great game designers for sure.
It's ironic that they all fall in that era, and today they wouldn't even get the light of day, right? Those great designers that had those core games in the late 80s and early 90s today would be on the other side of the breadline, right? Because they didn't meet the demographic needs, and that's
they would probably be making great indie games. Let's put it that way.
That's true. That's true.
And Mike Pondsmith would probably have been really pressured about why isn't he making black RPGs? You know, like that would be the real tragedy of it, right? Is that if the woke people had their way, he wouldn't have made any of the games that he made, and he would have had to have been, like, from their point of view, they would have been wanting him to make RPGs about Africa or something, you know, which is
they'd come up with some way that they could call him the black face of white supremacy, you know.
Yeah. If he didn't do what they said, yeah, for sure.
Looks like we're at the end of the line here, guys.
I think so. Well, we've had a good run here.
We sure have. We've almost gone 2.5 hours. I'll take a minute to remind everybody that if you have not already, make sure you hit that like button. It really does make a difference. And hit it now so that you don't forget. Also, if you're not subscribed to us on Inappropriate Characters on this channel so that you can get the Sunday Night Delight every 4 weeks, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. If you want to subscribe to Pundit or Venger or me or Nerdcognito, all of those details are in the video description. Make sure that you follow those links. And Chris, make sure that you are following Mad Scribe on Twitter/X. Your handle is just Mad Scribe Games, right?
Right.
Mad Scribe
and
Games.
also on Facebook.
And on Facebook. You're still there. I haven't converted a Facebook sale in months.
I'm on Facebook personally as well as an alias of myself because I've been banned for 300 years. But
that's right, because you were in my message requests forever, and I'm never there to begin with. And then,
but Mad Scribe Games has a Facebook page. Onkur Kingdom of the Gods also has a Facebook page. But I've been a lot more on Twitter ever since Elon Musk took it over and all that. So it wasn't a safe space for me in the past, and so I'm very happy to be using that platform now.
Well, we are happy to have you there only because we're going into an election cycle on Facebook. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I get banned every election. It's sometimes without even posting anything. The last ban I got was for something I posted 5 years ago or something.
You made
so they're
someone
really
mad and they mined your profile. Yeah,
right. They're really digging. Anyway,
I don't really use Facebook personally for anything except I have the RPG Pundit page and I promote, and I talk about RPGs there and I share my videos there on that page. I don't use it I don't have I had one, but it's basically, I haven't posted to it in ages, a regular Facebook account. And as far as I'm concerned, Facebook is a good place, especially if you look at some of the Facebook groups.
The groups,
to promote
yes,
your products and things like that, right? Because there are still people there, mostly boomers, who are on Facebook, right? But they buy products, right? So that's good. But I would never post anything, I would never bother to post politics there because, as you say, right, that's just inviting to get banned,
Well, ironically, I don't post politics at all on Twitter. The one place I could and get away with it, I don't do that. But the Twitter account's just business. The Facebook account for Mad Scribe is also just business. I don't talk about anything there either. But my personal account, I post memes. I'm a meme lord, so I post memes 10 times a day, and they get shared virally and all that kind of thing. So I have to keep that up.
So now you guys know where to go if you need to laugh. Pundit, last word.
Well, I would say, guys, be sure to check out from Mad Scribe Publishing his Mad Scribe magazine, which is really great. If you liked the old Dragon magazine and stuff like that, you should totally check out all of the issues of Mad Scribe magazine. They have some great articles in there. And of course, if you also want to support Mad Scribe, you should check out some of his excellent publications like Sword and Caravan, Social Encounters. Those are both gold bestsellers, if I'm not mistaken. Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road, and Wilderlands for Sword and Caravan.
Those are some great books.
It's amazing you guys picked those ones.
yeah. Those are great.
And on drive-through right now, I've got a bundle set up. So all 4 issues of Mad Scribe from 2023 are only $10 a piece. So you get the bundle. It's $40 for 4 copies. So the next 5th issue is coming out anytime now. Give it a couple of weeks. But that's going to be it's the 50th anniversary of D&D edition, right? It's much larger. It's about 120 pages. Most of the other ones were 70 to 80 pages. And this has got a lot of good material in it. And I've decided to make the entire magazine look like something from the 80s. So it's
very cool.
Yeah, there's a very nostalgic look to the entire thing. So all the ads and everything, it's going to look neat.
Everybody is filing out in the chat now. They know that it's winding down. My name is Ryan David. Thank you for watching. Pundit, when is our next show? According to my calendar,
next
it's looking
show,
like
believe it or not, is
May 5th.
Cinco de Mayo.
Cinco de Mayo.
So it's going to be the Latin themed.
It's going to be beautiful. I'm going to get my expert basic hat out. We're going to love it.
Let's see if we can get the basic expert on for that. I doubt it, but
I'm totally game, but I'm pretty sure that's why the Black Lodge guys are a little sour on you right now. Anyway, not starting anything up. My name is Ryan David. You've been listening to the RPG Pundit and Chris Miller, the Mad Scribe. We'll see you May 5th. Inappropriate Characters, Sunday night, 8 p.m. Have a good night, everybody.
Take care.